It's difficult for commuters to confront each other because, all kinds of things can happen.
They're not really doing anything wrong, per se. They're just being a little bit inconsiderate. But do they know they're being inconsiderate?
They might not, right? Because you're not aware of your surroundings and you're so self-absorbed in your music or video that you're watching.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Heart of the Matter. Now, if you are a regular on public transport, you would have witnessed at least one of these things. Someone either watching a video on their phone with the volume on at full blast, someone putting their feet on the seat, or someone cutting their nails. I never quite got that. But in a recent commentary for CNA, Dr. William Wan from the Singapore Kindness Movement argued for some sort of regulation on people displaying such inconsiderate behaviour in public. So today we want to ask, should we ban these loud videos from, public transport? Who should be the ones enforcing it? And why do people sort of engage in these behaviours in the first place? With me to discuss this are Michelle Tay, Director of the Singapore Kindness Movement.
Hi, thank you for having me, Stephen.
Associate Professor Ho Kong Chong, Head of Urban Studies at Yale-NUS College.
Hello, happy to be here.
Okay, welcome to both of you. Can I ask you first, what do you think is the most common inconsiderate behaviour that you've witnessed recently, and how did you respond to it? Michelle?
One is taking video calls on the public transport, like on the bus, right? Because you can't stop the caller from calling you, and you do not have your earpiece for some reason.
Okay.
So they start talking over the video call and start conversaing loudly where everyone else, the passengers can hear you over during your commute. Yeah.
Okay, and what do you do when that happens?
The first natural reaction one would do is to give a stare, right? Like, what are you doing? It's like, so, and then you go like, shh, because your child is next to you, you can't be scolding the person, right? So you look at your child, and you look back at the person, and you're like,
yeah,
you just smile
hoping
back.
they will get it, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, you're like, but usually they don't. Okay. Prof, what about you?
Probably listening to music without the headphones or watching videos on the phone.
So it means everything's on at full blast, you can hear every...
Yeah.
Okay, and
when that happens, I move away.
Yeah, I guess.
No, I think it's difficult for commuters to confront each other because all kinds of things can happen.
And in such a confined space, it's hard, right? How do you tell someone, because they're not really doing anything wrong per se, they're just being a little bit inconsiderate. But do they know they're being inconsiderate?
They might not, right? Because you're not aware of your surroundings and you're so self-absorbed in your music or video that you're watching.
Yeah.
I think the volume level is not recognized, or they don't acknowledge what is a high volume or what is a low volume.
Right? Yeah.
So here's where we need a better sense of who are the people doing that. Speaking as a sociologist, I could think of people who live in buildings that have or apartments that have more people. And so, the noise level goes up. And so you're used to that kind of higher noise environment than somebody who lives in a less dense place. Then we ask people who are elderly whether they have a bit of hearing impairment. That's an issue too. So I think before we step forward, we need to ask what are the backgrounds of these people.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, because if your normal, what you're used to on a normal day is a much higher level of sound, then what you're doing in the bus may not seem out of the ordinary for you, at least, right? We also did a quick poll on our Instagram account, on CNA's Instagram account, and we, asked people about some of the inconsiderate behavior they've encountered. We had over about 6,800 responses. 87% said they noticed it on trains and buses. The top peeves were playing music or videos on speaker, putting belongings on the seat next to them, talking loudly. Some also pointed out things like blocking the exit so that they can get off first, rushing into the cabin before those have alighted, clipping nails, picking nose. I mean, okay. Yeah, not clipping nails is a bit noisy. Picking nose can be quite a quiet affair, but at the same time, it's just all activity that when you see it, you're like, ugh, it does, irk you. So how do we sort of decide what is okay and what is not okay to be done in a public space, a shared space?
I think when you look at it, LTA had launched the graciousness on public transport campaign, right? That's when you have the little mascots of, Stand Up Stacy, Moving
Yeah.
Martin. And those were very cute mascots. I mean, there were 5 of them. But I think what were downplayed were the other mascots like Hush Hush Hannah, right? Asking people to be quiet. But of course, people are more inclined to the cuter ones, maybe giving up of seats that was more amplified. Trying to focus on the other mascots in trying to sort of nudge behaviors could be one where we tell people, hey, there were other mascots. Could you look at that and be reminded? I think in terms of public transport, situational awareness is important.
Right.
Where if you probably see a sign and you get recalled, oh yes, I shouldn't be doing this. That's where people maybe feel the little nudge of, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. It took us 5 or 6 years just to change certain behaviors like giving up seats, right? But the background was that, what did we do? We had to change the colours of the seats in the MRT trains, right? We had to have constant reminder of, playing the music, playing the jingle to tell people, remember to give up your seats and things like that. Yeah, so I think certain behaviors takes time to change.
I agree.
And which are the more important ones that we should be focusing on now? Yeah.
So you're saying in a way a campaign, I mean, we've run
For
those
lack
before.
of a better word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of an education, a bit of awareness to help people remember and I guess understand why their behavior may affect others around them.
Yes.
Maybe less of a campaign, but more of an ongoing signages that create this kind of awareness. So rather than having a fixed period, you could have a number of things on bus panels and so on. Having said that, I think public education campaigns are actually very important, very useful, because we live in a high density, heterogeneous environment where there are all kinds of behavior, right? But at the same time, I think it's important that we not develop a culture of intolerance.
Okay.
If we are too strict on some of these things, then you sort of specify the boundaries of what is acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think that could be dangerous.
Well, that's when we move towards regulation, where basically there's a fine, there's punishment. I mean, some countries do it, where basically there's not just pay a monetary fine, you possibly even have jail time, which sounds a bit severe for putting my feet on the bus seat. Is it a bit much? But do such extreme methods sort of really drive home the point?
In the article, I think William likened this to the kinds of behaviors between neighbors.
Yeah.
I think it's quite different. I think with noisy neighbors and loud neighbors, you can't escape. You live directly next to or beneath them. And I think that's more serious. And I think over time, the ministry has developed measures where officers can go in, inspect, put in instruments and so on. But, if you look at trains and buses, we're talking about behavior that's very short. You get up, you get off. Nowhere near the level of seriousness as we see between neighbors.
Okay, so worst case scenario, I have to endure this guy for 45 minutes, then I'm off the bus, right?
Off the bus, move to the back of the bus, go somewhere, or even if it's really bad and the chap irritates you, get off the bus and take another one.
So in a way, it can be quite easily resolved. How much of this would you say stems from our inherent behavior? I mean, here, growing up, we're Asian, we're very strict in being formal about our courtesy and etiquette. But I notice in some cases when you come to the office, people don't say good morning, hello. You exist and you know each other, and when you need to, you work together, and you like each other fine enough. It's just that we don't have that culture of greeting, of acknowledging. We're quite self-centered in that sense. Not that we want to be selfish, but we think it's okay, and I'm not affecting anyone, so to speak.
There are many times where we don't do these kinds of greetings. It's maybe it's Asian.
Yeah.
But I think the kinds of things you just talked about, being courteous and being kind, The other things that we just talked about is the polar opposite. This is people are really unaware or really not courteous. There exists a whole range in the middle, whereby you're neither. So in our daily encounters, I take the bus and the train quite often. Very often we don't encounter these kinds of behavior, and when we do, we are often at an odds to figure out what to do.
Okay.
Right?
But I guess what I'm getting at is also that these people who play their music loudly, who watch their shows, don't intentionally want to be inconsiderate. Do you know what I mean? It's just for them, as you mentioned, maybe their environment at home is perfectly normal. Or maybe, they just don't see it as being inconsiderate.
Yeah, so I think sometimes they're really just too self-absorbed, right? Like you say in the workplace, when you just get to your work desk and you just sit down, you're just so self-absorbed. There's so many things going through my mind, right? So we're not really conscious of acknowledging another human's presence in front of us.
So how do we then therefore have this behavior become more automatic, where we become more clued into our environment such that we can respond accordingly?
For kindness, it's really about being other-centered, right? It's not just being so self-absorbed, but how can you think of others in a shared space, like whether you're in a public transport or at a park? How could you just take a look up? I always say, don't look at your mobile phones for so long. Just take a look up and look around you. There are always people who might need a help or assistance, Don't always, there's nothing on the carpet, right? We keep looking down anyway. So just take time, take a look up. 1 second is all it takes for you to look around your surroundings. Maybe a smile or not could help someone.
It'll save you from getting hit by a car as well if you
Yes.
at least look up from your phone. A lot of surveys show that all this behavior has increased. I mean, a global aviation survey also shows there's a 47% increase in unruly behavior in the air. I mean, noise-related complaints among neighbors have also gone up. You ask any of the MPs, I'm sure that's one of the issues. So all this behavior, I mean, how do we also respond to it in a way that doesn't make it worse? Because sometimes you see someone doing that and you go to them, and instead of saying, "Oh, excuse me, do you mind just turning it down?" you say, "Hey, hello, softer can not?" Right? And that sort of provokes and antagonizes the person too, right?
It does. And earlier we talked about the softer approaches, having signages, reminders, and so on. But it can be balanced by other kinds of measures. For instance, we have a One Service app where people could complain about litter in their neighborhoods. So it's easy to pick up the phone, press, and it goes up, and you have that. Actually, the bus captains are empowered to intervene.
Yeah.
It says very clearly.
But again, in recent occurrences, that has not turned out well. That intervention has become confrontation, right?
Yes, that's the thing. There's a whole range of behavior, Steve.
Yeah.
Right? So range of behavior. If the behavior is not that serious, then the softer approaches work. But if the person is really being unreasonable, that's where the bus captain comes in. If it's confrontational, it is because that kind of behavior is more serious and cannot be tolerated.
Right.
I'm just wondering whether would peer pressure help? Like, if I'm a bit scared to ask, then, I could ask Prof to go and approach the guy. And then I would just be beside him supporting. We go, yeah, I think you could lower down your volume. I think as a society, because we're together, right? I feel that we need some form of peer pressure to encourage one another that, we're actually the majority of kind, considerate people. It's just that little minority who's making so much noise.
Other strangers in the bus, you all give each other the eye. And go like, yeah. You're kind of like ganging up with the guy, right? It sounds almost
Kindly.
in a kind way. You're ganging up with the guy.
Kindness takes courage, right? It's not
It
easy
does.
to confront the person as
So
well.
you're saying when someone takes the first step to say, "Excuse me, do you mind?" Someone else can say,
Yeah, other fellow passengers
know?
could have helped
Yeah.
along the way, right? You don't just leave it to that guy to...
But that's also not in our DNA, right?
Yeah.
We know here in Singapore, for many Asians, speaking up is not
No.
really commonplace.
No,
for us.
but even more generally, there's this thing called bystander apathy.
Oh, yes.
You never know whether somebody steps in to support you. If it's a mother of a young child being harassed, I think people are more likely to move
Yes.
forward and support. If it's an elderly person who's being harassed, you have the same thing. But in all other situations, whether Asian or non-Asian, you worry about bystander apathy.
So what do we do with what we have now? What would you suggest are the steps to move forward? I mean, do we need to, for one, maybe have some training for our bus captains so that they know how to address these issues nicely? Give them some of our like SIA flight attendant kind of training, so the customer service, they know how to deal with difficult customers, so to speak. And is it also on our part? Should we also be perhaps more mindful of how we address these situations? Because I really feel it's not so much what you say, it's often how you say it.
Yes, how you say it and how you deliver it. So I think, of course, bus captains need to be trained in some sense because they are the ones steering the bus, right? So they should be given some form of authority, in case of abuse or if you have anything, at least they are protected, right? So that's where the law come in place. But of course, I think as citizens or as passengers of the bus, we too also should take some ownership, I feel. Maybe I'm the more vocal one, but, if certain instances happen, don't be afraid to stand up and say what's right. Yeah.
Right.
Of course, I agree with you. I think some responsibility on the part of passengers and commuters is needed, especially if the person is becoming unreasonable after a polite request. So that should be done, and then everything scales up. Right.
Okay.
So if it becomes really bad, then the bus captains step in.
And usually in those cases, when it becomes an issue, I think most passengers will stand in to support the bus captain or the one, How do we look beyond that? Let's have a more long-term view. How can we start changing this behavior in us? What can we do so that our next generation will become perhaps more civic-minded, more mindful of others? Is it something we can do in our schools? Is it something we do at home? Where do you think we'd start?
I think public messaging and education definitely is important. So like even in the kindness movement school programs, we always teach, the 5 magic words, which are basic words. Please, sorry, thank you, excuse me, you're welcome. So these are very important words that you need to use, etiquette and things like that. So that's important. And then the next part is how do we bring that to certain social settings, like in the public transport? How do we give up our seats to those in need? Or when you greet your neighbors, often as Asians we're also taught not to talk to strangers, right?
Yeah.
So maybe how do you recognize your neighbor and how do you greet your neighbors politely? I think that's part of educating certain values and courtesies in our children. So from young, yes. Then after that, when we get into the space of, Prof earlier mentioned about, how do we have signages to remind people or to nudge people to behave in a certain manner.
The urban sociologist in me keep thinking about the urban context where our society is becoming larger, denser, and more heterogeneous. So these are all contextual variables that affect that drive these kinds of behavior. It's a way of living in the city and coming to terms with it. It doesn't matter which city you're in. Very large cities of millions of people, you're going to find those kinds of things. When you have these kinds of things, then everything the kindness movement suggests becomes very important because it moderates these kinds of behavior.
So in a way, you're saying we just got to live with it. It's going to always be here.
Yep.
And maybe there'll be good days, there'll be bad days, and there'll be other things along the way that may sometimes help the situation.
Yes.
But
yes, and there are moderating factors. I like to think that Thailand is very good at dealing with this because
how come?
Because the Thais are very gentle, because Buddhism teaches them that. But we're not that. We're not all Thais. We belong to different kinds of religious affiliations, a lot of non-believers as well. And so you have to expect that some of these kinds of things have a higher rate of occurrence than in other countries where there's a single religion. People understand, people share the same cultural traditions. Right?
Right.
So, good days, bad days, kindness movement is very important.
The word tolerance is important because as we progress and evolve and continue to become a busier, perhaps more crowded country, we will be encountering more of these situations. But to be considerate is really just one of the things that I guess if we tell ourselves the next time I get on the bus, I'm going to be a little bit more considerate of those around me, probably that would be a good first step. And if we come across someone who, perhaps is having a bad day, not in the right behavior, maybe just a kind word, a kind, quiet word to them might help. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and if you want to add your views to the topic, please just let us know on any of our social media pages. Drop us a note on Spotify or Apple as well. Otherwise, the team behind this podcast is Tiffany Ang, Jacqueline Chan, Joanne Chan, Saya Win, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Stephen Chia, signing off.